This video is a continuation of my last video about general stocking stuffing, but this section could hold its own as its own video, so that's what I did, was split these two up. So please go back and watch the other video if you want some more general ideas about what to get your guitarist. But guitar pedals are a great option, as we'll get into. So let's get into the video. So I have saved the most exciting but also potentially the hardest for a non-guitar player to buy for last. Affordable guitar pedals. Guitar pedals are one of my favorite parts of playing guitar. It can be a vast land of possibilities, which is good for the players but bad for the uneducated buyers. So I will attempt to help by giving you some options for some scenarios and possibly give some micro lessons. While I am going to try and shorten and simplify these explanations, this might be a test of how much you love or care about the person that you're buying for. So the first thing you have to look out for is what your player already has and what they possibly need. So you have to make sure that they can connect and power their pedals. If they have multiple pedals, they may need patch cables. Also, if they have multiple pedals, it's a good idea for them to have a power supply. Most affordable pedals are too small to take batteries or just simply don't allow it. So I will have some recommendations for cables and an affordable power supply I personally use in the description. One thing that can go wrong with cheaper power supplies is that they can make bad noises through guitar pedals. So I recommend buying the bigger version of the one I linked below, because when I bought the smaller one, it had a couple of these sorts of different noise issues. Then again, they may have just simply changed something in the design, and they may have just made it worse. So if you can, try to test things before wrapping it up. But I know that could be confusing as well. Luckily, it also says that it is returnable until January 31st of 2024. So let's start with a typical scenario for beginner players. This usually applies for young people who can't afford much or players who just don't know if they're committed to playing yet. Usually they will start with a small or not great quality amplifier. And a lot of people get into guitar because they want to make rock sounds, right? Well, oftentimes these little amplifiers won't be designed well enough to make a distortion sound good, or sometimes they can't make distortion at all on their own other than some flub sounds when turned up loud. So in this scenario, one of the best and funnest purchases to make can be an overdrive or distortion pedal. Usually both together are better. So one of the safest options you can go with are Behringer guitar pedals. These can take 9-volt batteries, so they don't need a power supply, and they closely replicate real, more expensive pedals that are loved by many. These are typically $30 a piece and are in plastic enclosures, but their integrity varies from player to player. Some players do professional tours with some of these plastic pedals on their rig. I recommend the Vintage Tube Overdrive and the Ultra Metal Distortion. Keep in mind that there's a similar looking pedal that can look a lot like the Ultra Metal but sound very different. That is called the Heavy Metal Distortion and is not a beginner-friendly pedal, especially for finding great distortion tones. Now here's a tidbit you can use to sound smart and warn your player with. When they use the Ultra Metal, they need to be careful with the low, mid, high, and mid-frequency knobs. They are powerful controls, and small adjustments can make a big difference in the sound. If you push the knobs too far in a direction, it can mess up their sound, and they can perceive it as bad. A good place to start with it is, of course, in the middle with all of the tone controls and make small adjustments from there. So now let's say you have a player who has a good amp and they can get a good distortion tone, or they have other things that make that happen. Another possibility is that your player doesn't care as much about distortion, but they're looking for something to experiment with and get excited about. Well, a multi-effects pedal is a sure way to get the creativity flowing. These started as big units, but now you can get mini pedals that have many modulation effects in them. Typically, depending on what kind you get, your player won't be able to have multiple of the effects on at once, but it can allow them to experiment and play around with the effects, then they can get separate units later. Now these multi-effects can be a little more expensive, but you're getting a lot of effects in one. Some units I can recommend are, again, the Behringer Digital Multi-FX. It can take 9-volt batteries and has a decent selection of your average modulation effects. That costs $45. A brand that I like but has kind of the cheesy sounding brand name is called Cool Music. I liked some of their other pedals, but I haven't gotten to experience personally their multi-effects. It can't take batteries unless you get an external adapter, but you get some more abstract effects on this unit that can be kind of cool. That one costs $46. This last one is one that I got as a gift last year. This is the Flamma Mini Modulation Pedal. It has some classic options as well as some weirder ones, and I personally think this one's a blast. This one can be bought for $40, and it can't take batteries. So let's do one more scenario because there's something that your player's sound could be missing that we haven't mentioned yet, or at least have partially not mentioned. So let's say your player really likes the clean sounds. They like to play alternative and maybe poppier sounds, but something is missing. What they need are ambient sounds. These consist typically of two things: delay and reverb. Reverb is the sound bouncing around a room, and delay is the sound echoing back to you.
If you will shout in the Grand Canyon, it will be delay, like hey, 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 hey. And if you will shout into the Iron Barrel, it will be reverb, like hey. And one more time, Grand Canyon delay, and Iron Barrel reverb.
So delay is like reverb, but much more defined. You can find many affordable good delays. Reverb, however. Reverb is a harder one to get an affordable price and a good sound out of. Some good options for reverb are, again, the Behringer Digital Reverb. It is pretty much the best offering for affordable reverbs in terms of the available types available in the pedal. There are different types of reverb, and this unit has the most simulations out of any I've seen in this price bracket. Speaking of which, this unit also costs $45. Next is another Flamma pedal. They do great work in the semi-affordable range of guitar pedals in general. They have a mini reverb pedal with simple controls and 3 modes that sound great based off of some of the sound demos I've heard. Since this is a mini pedal, it can't take batteries unless powered externally. This pedal will give basic ambient sounds for the price of $40. Lastly, we have a brand that I haven't heard of until now. This is the EX Mini Digital Reverb. So again, this is a mini pedal, which means no batteries unless adapted. This one also sounded great in the sound demos. One thing that is interesting about this pedal is the mode switch seems to let you pan between modes. Typically, on most other units, like the others that I mentioned, the knob would have locking positions. So this is another great option for experimentation in lush ambience, and this one only costs $36. Now, like I said before, delay pedals are a dime a dozen, so I will give you some different options to fit different needs from you, the gifter, and your giftee. First, we have the Sofadio delay. It's one of the most affordable options at $20, but still sounds great. It does everything that a basic digital delay should do at a great price. It is a mini pedal, so no batteries. Next, we have the constant, Behringer Vintage Delay. This is considered an analog delay because of one of the chips that make the pedal work. Because it's analog, when your player turns up the time and repeats, they will start to decay and not stay as clear as they would with a digital delay. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's up to preference, but to me, typically a digital delay is better to start out with, and this one costs $30. Now this next one can give you the best of both worlds without breaking the bank. The Flamma delay pedal has 3 types of delay to select from. The options say analog, real echo, and tape echo. Now I'm pretty sure this pedal is all digital and doesn't have any of those special chips in it. But what they can do is take the digital signal and put filters on it to make it sound like how the other modes are supposed to sound. And they do it fairly well. Analog makes it so that I think the tone of the delays gets darker over time and make them not be able to go as long, but I may be wrong. I don't think they will start to distort the same way as the Behringer will though. Then there's real echo. I think this is the plain digital echo that can keep the signal almost perfectly clear throughout the echoes. Then we have a bonus mode on this unit called tape echo. I may be wrong, but delay used to be done on tape machines. I don't remember how, but they did. And this is supposed to replicate that vintage sound that came even before the analog chips. This is a great unit, especially for the price of $40. So if for some reason the specific pedals I recommended don't work for your situation, I can recommend some other brands and types. I made some good recommendations to get people started on their discovery and try and get them set up for success. And I don't want to confuse you and try and present you with options that come down to the preference of your player. But there are some honorable mentions that I would like to point out if for some reason the ones I have listed don't work out. So for the distortions, I picked one that is of course made from metal, but one of the classic loved distortions is the Rat Distortion. That one is $75 new. Not super cheap, but not the top of the line price bracket either. Luckily the circuit has been cloned a few times, and the Donner Dark Mouse is a great distortion based on the Rat pedal. Another option for a metal distortion that I really liked for a while is the Cool Music Insane Distortion. Now overdrives are a tricky thing. There are lots of different types of overdrive and lots of different pedals doing the different types of overdrive. The vintage tube overdrive mentioned before is a close representation of the tube screamer, which is a classic overdrive that has a boost to the mids of a guitar. That can be good, but some people don't like the tone change and the distortion type it provides. Some alternatives are the Klon circuit cloned by Mosky Audio. This comes in two different colors, which doesn't make a difference, and is based on a circuit that the original units now sell for over $5,000. It has a light to medium distortion and has been described as a tone enhancer. Another option is a blues-style overdrive, like the Blues Breaker or Blues Driver. Those are different circuits but do very similar things. They try to add some distortion to your tone that is similar to how the expensive amps would do it, and they try not to make a major change to how the guitar's tone sounds, but they also can because of the distortion and the tone controls. But they're not as exaggerated as a tube screamer style. I believe a pedal that can get the same tones is the K-Line Mellow Drive. At least the marketing material says so, and based off of some of the sound demos that I've heard, it doesn't sound too bad either. Now the final thing I'm going to talk about is another type of distortion. In fact, the first pedal ever created was one of these types of distortion, and that is fuzz. Fuzzes are basically distortions, but not properly built, but in a good way? Much like overdrives, there are a lot of different fuzzes, and there are a lot of pedals for each kind of fuzz. That is a slight exaggeration. There are typically only a few types of fuzzes that affordable brands go after, but there are certainly a lot of pedals doing very similar things. The only pedal that is often able to be identified as the origin for most of the fuzzes on Amazon is called... Some of you may not be ready for this. It's called the Big Muff. It's not the most mature name, but it's a classic. The Big Muff circuit is a more modern fuzz, so it can be fuzzy or it can be more distortion-like. So it's kind of a versatile pedal. One of the closest I've heard is the Mosky Mini Muff. It's a mini pedal, so no batteries, but listening to the sound demos, it sounds pretty close. An alternative, if you really don't want your player's gear saying Muff on it, is the K-Line M Fuzz. It's also pretty close, but it's a little more noisy and the tone is a little different, but still pretty close. Some other fuzzes that kind of have their own sound are the Joyo Voodoo Octave Fuzz. This is a really cool fuzz pedal that has a second foot switch to activate an octave effect to make your guitar sound bigger or more interesting. This pedal is slightly unique not only because it gives the player a lot of simple options to customize their sound, but other octave fuzzes typically only allow you to always have the octave on, but not this one. Another interesting fuzz is the Cuvave Fuzz, though it looks like they changed their company name to Shark Chili. Delicious. Anyway, this fuzz is supposed to have a sputtery, zippery kind of sound that sounds really cool. It's kind of got its own little following because so many people found it so interesting. It is a mini pedal, so no batteries again, and there was an issue before where they changed the sound of it a little and people didn't like it as much, but I do believe they have brought the original sound back. Some good brands if you're looking to shop around are, we've talked about Behringer and Flamma a lot, so those are good ones. But some other good ones that have focused on affordable pedals are Donner, Joyo, K-Line, and Sonicake. Keep in mind when shopping around, Amazon will typically not show every other pedal that is grouped together in a listing as separate options. so you may have to open a few tabs if you want to really know what's available and out there. Well, that's all I can think of for now. I hope I gave you enough ideas to be able to get your guitar player something new and helpful. Now, like I've said a few times, affiliate links in the description, use them to help me out. I tried to organize them for your convenience. Thank you for watching, especially if you watched the whole thing. You must really want to get your player something nice. That's all I have to say, and I'm going to say bye-bye.